I'm gonna sort of walk us back through where we've been, just so that like you can sort of see the thought process that we went through. Like in thinking about the strength of your cohort right now, like you have had success with certain folks, being able to get them to be on this path towards a meaningful destination with their kids because one, these are core members who are openly like reflecting. These are folks who have already had some basis of a vision that you can work with, and then the things that you've done with them have been things like you forced them to think about their vision and how they want to use it in their classroom, and you forced them to think of whether when they didn't really understand their vision or when they didn't understand certain components of their vision, how to make it come alive in their classroom. Like you've worked with them to do that. That's where you've been most successful because you've also been able to you've known they're ready for vision stuff, and I can start with them there. When we're thinking about the folks who are still in the disagree column, where we're like they haven't been ready or have not been able to get them to further along this path yet. The biggest bucket that we pulled out was management, and then there was this other bucket of folks that we think are now ready, and maybe management was a challenge in the past, maybe placement was a challenge in the past, maybe there are other various things for that other second bucket, but like the management bucket, one of the things you were saying was like, for some of these people, like either I didn't know where to start with them, or I wasn't connecting where to start with them to like where I know they needed to go. And then for that second bucket, folks who like the Abe, the Gabe, the Isabel, the Chelsea, and the kid, like the folks who are are like now ready to move on. You feel like you know where to start with them. Do you also feel like you know how to connect where they're going? So like if you're starting with them with some aspect of rigor or investment or mastery or some teacher thing that they need to work on, like or prior zone or whatever it is, like do you also know how to share with them like we're starting here first, but this is a part of the path that's going to get you to being more vision driven overall?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take Gabe first, like as an example of like we started with rigor. He came to my rigor session because I mean he wants it for his kids, like he knows that's part of his vision, and so with him it's like rigor is part of the academic piece of like what's possible for your kids to move into a new place than just the next grade level. Like the difference between that, but there's still these other things like dual language, the traits that you wanted that we're gonna still think about when we're reflecting on our classrooms, and we're gonna make strategies for. But for right now, we're gonna start with rigor because that can change the whole academic piece of your entire classroom. And so like that's kind of like where Gabe and I started. And with Isabel, we started with like.
Can we stop at Gabe real quick? So for Gabe, for example, once he has once you're confident that, okay, let's say rigor was the right place to start with him. Once you're confident that you're seeing some evidence of him increasing the level of rigor because that's a strong part of his vision, is there a next step for him? Or like how does he see that then as a part of the process of him ultimately being more along this path of being in a meaningful
it's like you
place?
can't be vision driven in 1 minute. Like if you're not sure what the pieces of your vision are and like what that looks like for your kids. So it's like first we're gonna start I kind of start down with the inputs. So like pathways, like for me is really hard on the elementary level, and some of the opportunities kids have here in Atlanta of like there's not a lot of summer programs, there's not a lot of middle school, I mean like applications, like things like that, where to me like that's like not deprioritized, but kind of like for right now we look more at like I'm using rigor as kind of the pathway. So then it's like to me the next really big thing is like the traits and the mindsets you want for your kids. So it's like now that I have like the rigor in place, and I know like how I want my kids to be engaged with material and content, because that's the content knowledge and the skill and knowledge that they need to have to be set up in a different path. The next piece is like there's also certain things that kids need to just behaviorally do that's gonna also help them be in a new place than just yay, I can explain how I got an answer, as opposed to not only can I explain I get an answer, but I have self-control and I have a path for college, whatever it is, because that changes like their entire being, which is the point. And so it's like we need to start with one thing to like, it's kind of like what the principal said today, you can't just eat an elephant. We had that in school last year, I think it was a dolphin though, or a whale. It was like, how do we eat the whale one bite at a time? And it's like that idea that like, when your kids are starting to attempt rigor, because he doesn't have management issues. So I'm not going to start the traits.
Yeah.
But like once your kids now have this rigor piece, and the thing I said to Gabe, and a lot of these people, they're in the boat of like your kids are invested in you, but are they invested in like themselves and their future? And like that's the difference between like I'm just teaching rigorous content and I have a good management system and being vision driven. And like Gabe right now is in that they're real invested in him, and there's not any management issues at all. Like he can manage a class fairly well, but it's just being able to manage kids, teaching them the things that they need as people, the skills, like critical thinking or whatever your vision is, to be in a different place in life, whether or not you're their teacher.
I mean, I think the way you're explaining to me Gabe's path and the connection between like why you're starting where you're starting and like how it connects to where he needs to be overall with being a vision driven teacher, which is what we want. I think that makes sense to me. When I think about like last night's conversation beforehand, you and I talked about Joe, and we were like, okay, we know Joe needs to like know where his kids are, so he needs to be progress known in order to start to think about like how is he going to get to his vision. And like he needs to understand this as a part. Oh no, I'm not saying. Yeah.
I'm just saying Gabe's progress known for math when he realized like his test was too easy. That's why.
I think I'm talking specifically about Joe though. Okay, but like when I'm thinking about last night's conversation, I'm thinking about like, okay, cool. So she definitely knows where she wants to start with Joe and like why it makes sense for him and like how this then connects for him. Like being ultimately in a place where he's more vision driven because you know if he knows where his kids are and then whatever the next step is, whether it's rigor or whatever else, like all these are pieces that he's adding onto the whole puzzle of boom, he's like on a different path towards a meaningful destination. Like I felt like coming into the conversation, you were able to accomplish for sure the first part of it. Like you were able to say, cool, we're going to make sure you walk away here knowing where your kids are, knowing why they're there, like and all that good stuff, and like how then like to use this rubric and I didn't see the second half of the conversation, so I hope I'm assuming that like y'all are able to enter in everything and like he knows where his kids are and everything, which is perfect. Like that's the objective. That was like the first half of the objective of the conversation. The thing that I didn't see, and maybe you did this when I left, was like how then are you gonna make sure Joe, like if I'm Joe walking away, how am I understanding how cool the fact that I'm progress known is just a step in the direction of ultimately getting me to understand like this is leading me to being more vision driven because I know where my kids are, because these are all things that you said to me in our prep before the conversation that I didn't see as much come out in the conversation because we were like literally focusing on trying to make him understand one, like his overall vision and how he understands like how like he needs to have his data input and all that good stuff, but then two, like we did go off on a little side tangent about the management stuff, and I didn't know if that was just because you had been in his classroom and you wanted to see how things were going.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, I think I agree. I like after he started talking, I kind of regretted bringing it up, but I also like didn't want to.
I mean, I think it was a good move because you wanted to validate like because I was there, and you know.
Yeah,
just,
and I think sometimes that's what core members sometimes.
I mean,
need.
Yeah.
I think the problem is, for me, was like I needed to learn more about his system that he's not using. So that way, like, next when we talk about traits that he wants for his kids.
Because that's where you're going
That's where I'm going next.
Because
that's why I needed to know that.
Okay, that's perfect. I think you should have said that.
Okay.
Because that, in my mind, I'm thinking, like, as an outsider, I'm thinking, like, why is she going down this route?
Yeah.
But if you had said the next thing, because your progress known now, and because this is such a vital part of ultimately getting you to the place where you're on a path towards a meaningful destination, I really do think that the next big thing for you, like based on where you are as a core member, is getting your kids to start to build this enduring penetration mindset. We started
talking about that when we left, in the sense that it was more about kids knowing. So I went with it in 2 ways. I wanted to know management for my own, like, when we start really talking about his traits, like how his system's not going to help with that. That was like back. Yeah. Before you left, what we then talked about was like, what does that look like for your kids? Yeah. Like we then made it back to his students, and that he's creating these student writing folders to help keep them organized, which is part of his traits, or part of what he believes that writers need to have. And also so kids know where they are, so they're more invested in their goals. So like that's where we ended it with, and when he's going to have that ready for. So kids figuring out how to. I'm a big student tracker. Like I think kids should be doing it. I know like not everyone is asking.
She shouldn't be saying this on camera.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But like, I think for Joe, because that's something that you heard him say is really important to him, and because I believe if it's like really important to the core member, like I'm gonna continue investing him in that, because I agree. that if he's really invested in his kids knowing where they are because he thinks that's going to help with the investment, then like he needs to set something up for that.
And it also seems